Welcome, everybody. It's our great pleasure to have as our guest today Henry Louis Gates, affectionately known to us as Skip Gates since he's on our board. He's also the head of the Du Bois Center at Harvard. He's written 12 books, This one is just out, Lincoln on Race and Slavery. Also just out this coming days is the PBS series that's connected to it. We've just seen a clip of it. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Gates.
Thank you, buddy. Nice to be back. Thank you. Of all the boards that I'm on, the Aspen Institute, without a doubt, is my favorite board. And it's because of my buddy who directs the Aspen board.
Hey, thanks. So did you try to knock him off the pedestal, Abraham Lincoln?
I wanted to brush him up, dust him up a little bit. I didn't want to... I was dragged into this project 2 years ago by my fellow co-executive producer, Peter Kuhnhart. And with the Kuhnhart, I have a production company called Inkwell Films, named after the black section on the beach in Martha's Vineyard, and Kuhnhart Productions, and we do joint productions for Oprah's Roots and my African American Lives series, and we're going to do a new series called Faces of America, using the African American Lives format, but for 2 Jewish Americans, 2 Catholic Americans, 2 Arab Americans, 2 Asian Americans, 2 Latino Americans, 2 West Indian Americans. So I go into production right away for that. But it turns out that the Kuhnhart family has one of the largest collections of Lincoln memorabilia in the whole world. And so they're Lincoln junkies. 2 years ago, he said, they are, I mean, totally. And their grandfather or great-grandfather started collecting Lincoln memorabilia right after he was killed, and they've inherited this huge collection. So he said, 2009 is the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth, and we want you to write and host and narrate a series. I said, I don't know anything about Abraham Lincoln. He freed the slaves, but that's shaky. And,
yes, right.
And he said, no, that's why we want you to do it. So I said to them, I didn't have to say it, but I said, look, you know, this is going to be my Lincoln. Because if you want hagiography, then do what standard PBS documentaries do about when they're addressing the black world, which is that they get some white guy to write it, and then they get Denzel or Morgan to read it, you know, with their voiceover. And that's not me.
Right.
So I started reading. You know, there are over 15,000 books written about Abraham Lincoln. There are only Jesus has more books written about him in the whole world. It's literally true. So I read all 15,000.
Right.
So maybe I read 24 books. And I was shocked to find out that he was much more complicated than the image with which we were raised. Now, when I was growing up, I'm 58. And I don't know about you, you know, you've been whiter longer than I have, Walter. So you have to tell me. When you were growing up, did white people have Lincoln's picture on the wall?
No, not in Louisiana necessarily, where I grew up. But it is true that we were taught, and you say this in the beginning of your book, when I was taught history, we were taught of Lincoln in the popular imagination, Father Abraham, the great emancipator, almost as an island of pure reason in a sea of mid-19th century racist madness.
Absolutely. And it turns out that he wasn't, that what happened subsequent to his death is that historians have conflated his opposition to slavery, and he was firmly, fundamentally, philosophically opposed to the institution of slavery.
But let me interrupt real quick. Why was he opposed to slavery?
It violated his understanding of natural rights. Every being was entitled to the fruits of its own labor.
So it was not because he believed in the equality of the races?
Absolutely not. He believed his father had failed dismally economically in Kentucky. And he had failed dismally because he was a poor white man trying to compete with white slave owners. And Abraham Lincoln, from his own experience, decided that that was unfair. It would be as if you and I were taking the SATs and somebody gave you 400 points out of 800. It eliminated the promise of America. And for him, the promise of America was equal economic opportunity. So what's happened in our day, he freed the slaves, which we'll talk about in a minute. He was opposed to slavery. That means he liked black people. That's a slippage. It's a non sequitur. He hated the institution. He did not like black people very much. In fact, listen to this quote. This is from a speech he made debating Stephen Douglas in 1858, Charleston, Illinois.
This is after Douglas had accused him of wanting mixed marriages and other things, right?
That's right, absolutely. I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. Add one more factor to this, which is colonization. And most of us don't know what colonization is today. But Lincoln wanted to free the slaves and then ship them out of the country. He wanted to ship them to Liberia first, then to Haiti, and then to Panama.
But he changed his mind on that.
Yeah, in 1864.
Okay.
You know,
now, on
that's because no blacks would go, man.
Right.
You know, it's hard to have a colonization movement without black people in it.
I guess.
You know.
Did he fight? He said the Civil War was not being fought to free the slaves.
No, it's to, eventually he changed his mind, but it was to keep the Union together. And because it was the last best hope of mankind was really representative democracy. And with these people, these southern states seceding, it trampled all over the Constitution and the Compromise of 1787. And he wanted, not on his watch. It's funny, last night, as you know, we did this big panel discussion at Harvard with Drew Faust and Tony Kushner and Adam Gopnik and 3 historians, all of whom were in the film. I was the moderator and 1,000 people. And we were webcasting live to Israel. And so we're talking about the two-state solution and why it wouldn't work in the United States. So by analogy, we were talking about whether a two-state solution would work in Israel too. But we didn't say it explicitly, but it was too close together, separated by a body of water, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I found that quite fascinating.
So you hesitate every time so far you've said he freed the slaves.
Yeah,
the Emancipation Proclamation does what and why?
The Emancipation Proclamation, which became effective on January 1st, 1863, freed the slaves in the Confederate rebellious states. Lincoln didn't believe, and he was probably right, that he did not have the constitutional authority to free the slaves. So he did free the slaves in the border states, states like Kentucky and Maryland, which stayed in the Union and where slavery remained legal. And the best estimate is that 500,000 slaves, there were 3.9 million slaves in 1860. The best estimate from David Blight and Alan Gelzo is that a maximum of 500,000 slaves were able to gain their freedom because of the Emancipation Proclamation. What was going to happen? Massa, the white man in Washington, issued this edict and we can walk off the plantation? No way. You had to be liberated by the Union forces.
Now, by the way, this book begins with a great essay by you and then has multiple speeches, letters, and essays by Lincoln on the subject. I think the first time he really talks about slavery is it the Mary Speed?
Yeah, the Mary Speed, very early on in his career.
1840.
41.
Yeah.
And he says that I am fundamentally and unalterably opposed to the institution of slavery. He never wavered. He never wavered about slavery. But he definitely wavered about black people. But he changed. Lincoln, the attractive thing about Lincoln and what we try to do in the film and what I certainly do in the book is to show that he was a recovering racist, that he got better. He didn't know any black people who weren't servants. Historians are so desperate to, there's a cult of Lincoln in the historical profession. And they're so desperate to protect him, they'll say, yes, yes, he had great black friends. I said, like who? Like Billy the Barber.
Yeah, right. What about Frederick Douglass?
Frederick Douglass changed his life. He met Frederick Douglass 3 times at the White House. He had never met a black man, his intellectual.
As a peer, intellectual.
Yeah, and Douglass was on him when Lincoln was elected. Lincoln's first inaugural address said that he was prepared to make slavery legal forever.